Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Blueprint Japan podcast. My name is Osang. I'm your host, and today is a very special day, and I am so excited but also nervous at the same time because my guest today is a serial entrepreneur and investor who has been in Japan's startup ecosystem for over 3 decades. He's founded multiple startups here in Japan. He worked at the intersection of startups and large enterprises, and he has been involved as an investor, founder, author, and educator throughout the entire time he has been here. He's also taught entrepreneurship and corporate innovation at the NYU campus here in Tokyo. He was head of Google for startups in Japan. He worked closely with Japanese enterprises like TEPCO and JERA on startup collaboration and investment. And if you're familiar with the Japan ecosystem and startup community, well then, congratulations, you guessed it. That was a really bad pun intended. I do apologize for that. But today's guest is the host of the Disrupting Japan podcast. Mr. Romero, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm glad to be here.
You know, obviously I did my research about you and your journey, and the more I looked into it, the more questions I've had, but then also the more fascinated I became by your story. And all of that, in my opinion, and you correct me if I'm wrong, started when you were 13 with your tomato business.
Yes, my first money-making venture. I guess so. When I was 13, I was a kid in suburban Virginia and just planted tomato plants and waited for them to sprout and went around and sold them. And it was not what you would call a scalable business, but something to do when you're 13. But I mean, getting back to your larger point, I mean, it's fun. I think it's definitely true that we are in a large part the result of these experiences we've had in our past, mm-hmm. right? But I think there's also this tendency to kind of put the story back together retrospectively. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I can definitely say that with almost any 5-year block of my life, if you would have asked me, okay, what are you going to be doing in 5 years? Mm-hmm. I would have had a very clear answer for you, and it would have been completely wrong. Mm-hmm. I would always end up doing something different. So it's true. We build on our experiences, but it looking back, it always seems like a much clearer plan than I think it is living through it forward as we have to.
Mm-hmm. Beautifully said. But then how did you end up with the idea of selling just tomato plants in your neighborhood? Because you had to have this like early entrepreneurial spirit from somewhere.
I honestly don't remember. I remember selling the plants. I tried so many little different things when I was a little kid in like elementary and junior high school. And I think that was just the one that kind of stick and people paid for it. And I ran around and did that for, a couple of seasons. Mm-hmm. And then, move on to something else.
That is fascinating. Was your next kind of like chapter in life, was it the music chapter?
Well, it's kind of funny. I mean, even, at least for me, I've always found that I always have a bunch of things going on at the same time. People talk about serial entrepreneurship, but I think it's more like parallel entrepreneurship. So the music was a big part of my life, still is. It's something I started getting into in high school, just for the hell of it. When I was in high school, everyone was playing guitar and starting bands. In the 90s, everyone was, making apps. And it turned out I was pretty good. Did a lot of that at university and helped pay my school bills. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't something that was planned. It was something that I had going on and started to take off and I enjoyed doing. So yeah, let's jump on that and see where that takes us. And I think more than anything else, that's kind of been my overriding decision matrix. Like, is this working? Am I good at it? Do I enjoy it? Does it add some value so people are paying me to do it? Yeah, if all that lines up, I think I'm onto something. Let's keep doing this.
It's I'm asking because I had a band when I was in high school,
Oh, awesome.
and we were like, young, and it was like we're so into the 90s rock and roll music, but then also the upcoming indie rock. That was a huge thing in Switzerland, it's and we were like, what, let's kind of try to combine these two genres together. And so just having fun, and we actually did make some money. But then, as life goes on with different schools, and after high school, we went to, well, some of us started working, and then some of us went to university, and then we kind of like lost contact. And so,
I mean, music it's a wonderful thing. I mean, it is incredibly rewarding on so many different levels. It's a fantastic hobby, but it is a terrible career. It is the hardest job I've ever had. And, it's fun. I mean, so I put myself through university primarily playing in clubs and bars up and down the Eastern Seaboard, just, cover stuff. And I met a guy who was in his like early 20s, and he just graduated from University of Virginia, same school I went to. And we were talking. He was a drummer, and I was saying, I put myself through school playing in bars. And he's like, you can't really do that anymore. I'm like, really? Why? He says, well, first, college is a whole lot more expensive now than it used to be. And second, people don't pay for live music. And that's a shame. Well, both of those were a shame for different reasons. But yeah, he had a point. So I think, there was this window in time where you could have that experience and actually make it work.
what I couldn't understand when I was reading your story, how did the Japanese label, contact you at that time?
Well, so when I first came to Japan, it was a series of coincidences. So my lab partner at university, his parents were stationed in Japan. His dad worked for Motorola, and this was back when, expat packages were fantastic. So they had this huge house in Mejiro, and my friend was talking to me, and he just mentioned like, so they got a 3 months back in the U.S. every summer. And, dad had to work, but the family got to reconnect with friends and pick up their social life. And he was just mentioning that his parents were trying to find someone to go feed the cats and water the plants. And I was like, me, I will fly to Japan. I will feed your dog. I will, water your plants. He's like, you serious? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I'm there. And his parents said, fine. So flew to Japan. This was summer of 86, 87, 86, I think. And just was this college kid living in this giant house in Mejiro. And my only real responsibilities were watering plants and feeding pets and stuff like that. And just went out, made friends, ended up playing with this band just for fun, because that's what musicians do. And that band ended up getting signed. And the management company wanted me to come over as well. And I'm like, well, let me finish school. Good call, which I did. And so then after I graduated, I came back to Japan. So that's, like I said, it's a long series of coincidences. But yeah, that's how I ended up coming to Japan to do music.
But then, like, being in Japan was never a priority, or was never on your radar, was it?
Not really. I mean, I like Japan. It's a lovely place. But I was never one of those guys that was like in love with Japan. I honestly thought I was coming here for, check things out for 2 or 3 years, see how it goes. And 30 years later, I'm still here. And I find that the people who come here that are in love with Japan, that want to live here forever, they tend to go back after 3 or 5 years. And I'm not sure why, but I think it's that. So the people who come here like for martial arts or anime or whatever it is, they've got this idea of what Japan is.
Yes.
And whatever that idea is, it's not that. it's something else, you know? And I think that a lot of people stress out over that. But if you come here for another reason and are just kind of open to the experience and can kind of figure it out as you go along, it's a wonderful place to live.
No, I can confirm that. I think you've said it beautifully in one of your early episodes on the Disrupt Japan podcast, where you said the ones trying to fit in the hardest have the most hard time to, adapt and to live their life here in Japan.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's if as a foreigner you try to be Japanese, if you try to be the normal conformist Japanese, it's very difficult. It can be very frustrating. And I mean, people who grew up here, that's a different matter.
Yes, 100%.
But someone that's like coming here as an adult and trying to like change your way of thinking and acting to fit in and follow thousands of these unwritten rules that no one will ever explain to you.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's hard.
I've had a couple of friends who came here because they, because the problem is nowadays, especially on social media, which luckily I am not on, Japan is like being portrayed as this like perfect country, this utopia for foreign people. And so then they come here and nothing really is like that, right? And life's reality hit, you need to work, you need to maybe nurture your family. And so I've had a lot of good friends move back home because they were so disappointed with everything, with the system.
Yeah, it is a wonderful place to live if once you figure out how you kind of fit in, right? And I think the way of fitting in for Japanese is very different from the way of fitting in for foreigners. And foreigners have to kind of bounce around a little more to figure out, how they do fit in. And the answer is different for many of us, right?
Oh, yeah. I have to say, we have a lot of advantages here being foreign people. And
yeah, I think so. I mean, it's a lot easier to live in Japan as a foreigner now than it was in the 80s.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, and not like a hostile way. I mean, just in a society is much more accommodating to foreigners now than it was in the 80s. In the 80s and the 90s, you had to figure out a lot more stuff on your own. And a lot of it's been sort of 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So I think that, I admire the people who are pointing out the misstatements in the media and social media, the falsehoods, the kind of fear-mongering. That's important work. People need to keep doing that. But I also think that it's perspective is important too. You need to keep that pressure and show the truth to make sure that if it is 1 step back, it's only 1 step back.
Beautifully said. Now, talking about the 80s and 90s, I am stuck in your story where you were working for the Japanese limousine business. And then I can't see the transition between that and Vanguard, your first company here in Japan.
Okay. So, yeah, after my music career, so I did it for a few years here in Japan, did it for a few years in LA. Wasn't particularly successful in either location. So cut my hair, started programming databases and my first employer was a small Japanese trading company called Limousine.
And that was by coincidence as well?
Mostly, yeah, yeah. I mean, the fact that I spoke a bit of Japanese probably helped. It certainly helped. They had nothing to do with cars. It was just the name of the organization.
Oh, okay.
No. We imported things like American Indian jewelry, used sports memorabilia. We went to the East Coast and got like these old, like 100-year-old barns that were falling apart. We would buy them and disassemble them and sell the wood. Because it's this gorgeous weathered wood that people would pay a fortune for in Japan. For like interior design type stuff. So yeah, it's like we imported everything except for cars. Uh, and that was fun. And I was still programming databases for them, but I ended up doing buying and other things. It was a small organization. You get to do a lot of different stuff. And they transferred me back to Japan. And in the mid-late 90s, you know, this internet thing sounded kind of interesting. So I quit my job and started my first startup and kind of put me on this particular path I've been on since.
Mm-hmm. You make it sound so easy. There's,
Do
I came here, quit my job, and
I mean, I think that, you know, that's kind of like looking back and telling the story, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, being in the moment, none of it was easy. You know, quitting music was certainly not easy.
Mm-hmm.
Starting this startup wasn't easy. And there's a bunch of other things I experimented with that didn't work out. Mm. And in fact, I'm sure there's more of those little failed experiments than I even remember today. You know, you forget the things that don't add to your story, right? And I'm sure there are lots of them.
Okay, so take me back to that very first moment when you decided, you know what, I'm going to quit this job and I'm going to start my first company in a foreign country.
Well, I've been living in Japan, so it wasn't really, I hadn't like decided to come to Japan to start a startup. Mm-hmm. I'd been in Japan. I was at a job with people that I liked. They were nice, but there was no career path for me there. Mm-hmm. It was going nowhere. I was bored, you know, and just the internet was this really exciting thing. And I started to talk to, and again, in the 90s as a foreigner, you didn't really have a whole lot of career options. Mm-hmm. You could work for, you know, the foreign companies. I was in IT at the time, and that was kind of like a closed shop at most of the banks and things. But this internet thing was just booming. People were talking about it. The first 6 months, I was just sort of doing whatever I could. I was making websites. I was like anything remotely having to do with the internet. And then I was just started developing internet-based software, e-commerce software, pulled a team together and raised a bit of money. Mm-hmm. Again, you know, these are things I'm laying out as like very simple one-liners, but they weren't. You know, each one of those was, a long and sometimes difficult process. But honestly, it is. There was no great like revelation of this is the moment. It was just, it's been 30 years of putting one foot in front of the other. Mm-hmm. This is what I have to do now. This is what makes sense at the moment. And if sometimes you head off in the wrong direction, well, you just don't have to include that little part of the story, right? You can backtrack, like, oh yeah, this is where I wanted to go. Yeah, there's been plenty of those too.
So Vanguard was 1996 as a Yugen Gaisha, right?
That sounds about right. You've probably done your research, so I'm going to assume that's the right number. It sounds correct. So yeah, I originally incorporated it as a Yugen Gaisha because at the time, a KK required 10 million yen.
Oh.
And I didn't have it. So Yugen only required 2. Okay. So that's why I did that. Then I got enough business going that I could increase the capitalization.
Okay, so you invested your own money into the Yugen Gaisha to make it a KK.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I do have listeners who may not be familiar with the system. So Yugen Gaisha is what we know.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really different system today.
Yep.
Again, much more friendly towards entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. But back then it was, the capital requirements were really strict. Yugen was kind of like a Godo Gaisha now, but not really. Mm-hmm. It was all the mom and pop restaurants and things. The SMBs a lot were Yugen Gaishas. They weren't considered proper companies. You couldn't really contract with a large Japanese enterprise unless you had a KK. Mm-hmm. So that's why I was like squirreling up money and like increasing that capital. And then once you get a freshly minted KK, you can theoretically work with the big companies and other hurdles to overcome.
Okay, so then that was Vanguard.
Yeah.
And if we stick to the timeline, you exited Vanguard successfully after 5 years.
It's about right. Sold to, so Digital Garage acquired it in 2001.
Okay.
And I was at Digital Garage for a while, and then started another company. I mean, I started a series of them,
Yeah.
really. So everything from warehouse inventory management to document classification and processing, to, I got it from customs clearance. I almost forgot about that one. And again, a lot of false starts too. So I talk about those four because those are the ones that actually launched a product and had a team and did something with. And two of them exited, two of them failed. But there was probably another 12 or 15 that didn't go anywhere.
How do you decide when you want to go one route? How do you decide, or back then at least, what type of company made sense?
I think the basic rule is the same. And again, this is for B2B.
Yes.
All of my startups that had any success at all were B2B. I experimented with some others that did not do well. So I understand B2B. I know how to sell it. I know how to position it. But the basic equation is the same. You need to solve some hard part of the customer's problem. Something that the customer either can't do or is afraid to do. And as long as you're doing that, you can build a very defensible business around it. But that means you have to understand what the problems are. On the consumer side, it's kind of a different set of objectives. But I think that core way of thinking is the same now as it was 30 years ago, as it was 60 years ago. I don't think that has changed at all. I think the ability to get to market, the speed at which you can get to market now is much, much faster.
Oh, yeah.
The speed at which you can validate that you are solving a customer's problem is so much faster now. Because before it was having meetings and drawing on whiteboards and there was no discussion publicly and going to trade shows. And so it took longer. But the basic focus, the basic objective, I think is the same.
But then when it comes to market research and finding the gap in the market, how did you do that? Because there was no information available as it is today.
Talk to people,
Yeah.
buy drinks, talk, listen to what people complain about. People love to complain. People love to complain. What are they complaining about? Can you fix it? Can you make it a little better? Are they willing to pay to have it fixed? I mean, if you keep your ears open for it, it's not hard to find ideas. It's hard to find profitable ideas, right? But finding the pain points, finding things that are broken, that's not too hard.
So all of your companies or ventures, did you start them all by being a solo entrepreneur, or did you have co-founders all the time?
They all were, so in all cases, they were pretty much solo entrepreneurs in terms that I put in the initial capital and no one quit their job except for me. So some of them I had a founding team that joined pretty quickly. That were working for very low salary. So in general, yes. But in general, yeah, I was a solo founder. I don't think I'd do it that way if I was doing it today. In fact, the last company, one of my most famous companies, one that failed. And I wrote an article about it's a contract management system called Contract Beast. And I wrote an article about why I shut that down and why I returned money to investors and things like that.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Is that the one that you also had an episode on?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. The why I turned down 500K,
Yes.
shut down my startup and pissed off my investors.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one went viral. And it's great. It's still every couple of years it gets reposted to Hacker News and discussion erupts again. So that was more of a founding team,
Okay.
but in the sense that it was a team of people helping to build the product, but I was the only one that had quit my job.
Mm-hmm. You know, it takes a lot of courage and you know, not self-esteem, but you need to know yourself quite well to know when to quit. I
Yeah.
think that's one of the biggest skills that you should have as an entrepreneur. I think you mentioned that you saw the problem at that company with an unfixable flaw.
Yeah, exactly. So we had please tell the audience, go read the article, listen to the podcast. It's worth it. It really, if I do
100%.
say so myself. But yeah, there was our customers were telling us they loved the product, that they wanted to use it, that it would solve this problem, but they weren't actually using it. And when we asked them, like, okay, which contracts are you putting in? It was a very particular type, and it wasn't the scalable type that we needed them to do. So basically, we identified a problem that, like, if we don't fix this, we're going to fail. And we were right at that point where people were ready to quit their jobs. We had commitments from investors to put money in, but we had no idea how to fix this problem, like, at all. And it wasn't like a simple technical problem. It was a product design, go-to-market problem. And we brainstormed on it for a couple of weeks and just had nothing. We had absolutely no approach on solving it. And so I shut it down. And I love that this, like, gets reposted to Hacker News every couple of years, because the debate goes on, because a lot of people, take the money and pivot, figure it out. That's what you're supposed to do as an entrepreneur. I'm like, yeah, okay, I respect that. But on the other hand, I'm about to dedicate a couple of years of my life very seriously to this, and if I don't see a path forward, I'm not going to make that bet. And over the years, I've become convinced there isn't a right answer. There's definitely a right answer for me, and I made it. I made that right decision. But yeah, it's an interesting dilemma.
When was that?
Wow, that would have been 2018-ish, 17-ish, something like that.
Because I'm trying to follow.
They all blur together.
Yeah. Which makes things a lot more interesting. As you mentioned before, you were doing a couple of things at the same time.
Well, that's part of it. I have a lot of things going on at the same time. And when one starts taking off, the others get shut down.
Okay.
And basically, if someone quits their job to join it, okay, everything else gets shut down, right? Obviously. So it was before TEPCO. And I think before I took the podcast commercial.
Yeah,
so
that must have been after 2015 for sure.
Yeah, so that would have been 2015? Couldn't have been that late. No, it had to be 16 or 17, I think. I'd have to check. Okay. I've got to check my own bio. I don't remember these things.
I'm trying to understand when the transition from you being, a serial entrepreneur to you going to the enterprise happened.
Well, I've worked in big companies before. I worked at Zurich Financial briefly. I've worked at a hedge fund. Although that's not a big company. They were kind of, in IT, they were very entrepreneurial and friendly and such. But moving towards the CVC was when I went to TEPCO.
Okay.
And that was 2018-ish. I feel like I should know these numbers in my head, but I don't remember the exact dates.
Yeah, I don't think so.
I can work it out backwards for you by subtracting.
It's not easy. You've done so many things, right, at the same time. And all of them were had huge impact on your life, and so it's okay not to know.
But it's also, there's a lot of other things that I was doing at the time that didn't end up having a huge impact on my life. So I mean, things like, well, like the podcast, for example. Well, I mean, no, the podcast Disrupting Japan has definitely had a huge influence on my life. But at one point, I was seriously moving this towards large-scale commercialization.
Yep.
So I was talking with Nikkei Radio about making Disrupting Japan an official Nikkei podcast. It was commercial for about a year. I was planning on building this podcast network, and I was talking with Dentsu and Hakuhodo about putting this together, and could have happened, might have happened, but about that time, the innovation team at TEPCO got in touch with me and just said, "Hey, this is what we're doing. It sounds interesting." I'm like, that does sound more interesting than podcast ad sales. So shut that down and moved to TEPCO. And if I'd made the opposite decision, I'd probably be telling a very different story today. Maybe even more interesting, but a different one. So I think we always leave out these little side projects and these little diversions. We leave those out of our story for time's sake, right? You've got to keep it reasonably succinct, despite the fact I've got like a 5,000 word bio on my website. Even that is quite, condensed.
Yeah.
So I think all of these little things that we do, and even if they're dead ends, they're still important. They still contribute. It's not a linear progression at all.
You mentioned Nikkei and Dentsu. How? Because that was a decade ago. That was 10 years ago, ish.
No, ish.
Ish, yeah.
Ish.
How did you get connected with those companies?
I'm not sure exactly. I mean, I'm pretty good at getting connected to whoever I want to get connected to. So it might have been trade shows, it might have been events, it might have been me figuring out like what they're trying to do and say, "Hey, I've got an answer to this question you have, and let's give me half an hour and let's talk about it." So I don't remember particularly.
Okay.
But yeah, that's one of the things I guess I'm pretty good at. I can usually get in to meet someone and have a good discussion. It may or may not lead anywhere, but I can get the meeting.
By the way, on a side note, you're very generous. I've met you a couple of times at the Tokyo American Club, and it was okay for me to approach you. We've met at a couple of events, so thanks for that.
Oh, of course, of course.
So when if we stay at the enterprise side, what are some of the biggest trade-offs that you had when you switched between, being a serial entrepreneur and then being a corporate insider?
Well, I think the biggest one is being in charge of your own strategy, being in charge of what your objectives are. So if you're running a startup, definitely, I mean, you have your vision, and that vision is tempered by reality, by the market and your customers, right? But it's your call. You decide what you want to work on and where you want to go. It is your vision. Working in large enterprises, you don't have that. I mean, you can pitch to management, but you're fairly narrowly constrained. You're being brought in to do a job, and you can give advice. If you think they're about to make a horrible mistake, you can kind of gently point that out. But most of the time, you're there to fill someone else's vision, to make someone else's vision happen as best you can. And you still put some of yourself into it. But, that's the big trade-off.
I'm asking because I feel like entrepreneurs are, sounds really bad, but the worst employees.
Yeah. I mean, speaking as an entrepreneur, I can be kind of rough to manage. You could ask some of my previous managers about that. I think that Entrepreneurs are very, very comfortable working for other entrepreneurs.
Yes.
It's a style and a way of communication that I've kind of learned to temper over the years. So like the work I've done at TEPCO or JERA, I couldn't have done that 20 years ago. I wouldn't have had the patience for it.
Yeah.
I've mellowed with age. And yeah, it is the corporate culture. It is constraining, but a lot of it depends. I think it's kind of a mistake just to look at the enterprise or corporate culture as a whole. So I've worked for TEPCO and I've worked for Google. Now you will not find two organizations on the planet, two enterprises on the planet with a more different corporate culture than those two. They both work in their own way. They're both perfectly logical. But the irony is I had much more creative freedom at TEPCO than I did at Google. And the reason was simply the role I was in. So at TEPCO, I could say, hey, this is a really interesting opportunity. This is what it's going to take to do it. Let's try it. And the reaction might be like, well, okay, this seems a little strange, but he's the innovation guy, so let's give this project, 10 million yen and see what happens. And at Google, everyone thinks they're the innovation guy. So they need these kind of guardrails and constraints to keep people on track. And I was part of a much larger team, so my degrees of freedom were much, much smaller. So it's a mistake to look at an enterprise or the image of the company as a whole and try to figure out how much freedom you're going to have in the role. It really depends on the team and the role as well. But at any time you join a large enterprise, you're joining to achieve their objectives, not your own. And that's all the other differences kind of flow from that.
I was working in IT consulting before I came here in Switzerland, but then also at a F&B company. And again, two very different companies, different structures. And I figured it all depends on your manager or mentor a lot. So at the IT company, I'm still good friends, in good relationship with my boss. He was encouraging me to come with him to a lot of meetings, C-suite meetings, and he gave me a couple of workshops to lead with him. And I mean, I was 24 back then, so no experience really. He was really encouraging. And then the other company, no matter how much I tried to change things or come with proposals and ideas, and that was more a creative role, it was just no, we have our opinion and you're just an employee. And so if you're a creative person and you have that entrepreneurial spirit, I feel like that can crush you quite a bit.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, you got to find the right role for you. But the flip side of that is there's a lot of great things about working for a large company. And in my startups, when I've recruited usually sales from out of larger enterprises, boy, there's a big adjustment that goes on because there's so much infrastructure in these large companies that handle things where, someone would be like, we're like a 5-person company. It's just like, okay, well, I need these slides done. I'm like, well, you're gonna have to do them. or even just like, hey, can we order these kind of office supplies? I'm like, yeah, sure, just go do that. And it's just, it takes some getting used to, going either direction. And I do think one of the things that is still missing in Japan, and this is what America does really well. So if you're a startup in the US and you're trying to sell to a large enterprise, you probably have some people on your team that have worked in large enterprises, probably 1 or 2 people across the table from you have worked at a startup. There's a lot of kind of cross-pollination going on where people will leave large companies, go to work for startups, leave startups, go to work for an enterprise, and just, revolve. Doesn't happen much in Japan yet. We're having more and more people leaving the enterprise to start startups or to join startups. And in the early career, having startup experience can be beneficial. But it seems so far that, for like middle management up, it doesn't seem like we've got that kind of cross-pollination, that mobility, the job mobility between startups and enterprise in Japan yet.
And you're mostly talking about local people.
Well, yeah. I mean, the workforce in general, I think having the foreign population involved is important too, but we're a very small percentage of the workforce.
Yeah.
And an even smaller percentage of the real decision-making workforce. So I think culturally it's important that this, mobility happen. But it's not just between startups and enterprise. Japanese enterprises traditionally don't hire mid-late career management, from other enterprises. They tend to promote from within. That's changing. It's changing for sure. But it's still, the majority of the C-suite will still be career employees from that company.
That's interesting. I think, correct me if I'm wrong on the name here, Naoki Yamada-san, the one episode that you had with him, he was saying, I see more and more, but again, this was like 5 years ago or 7 years ago, but he was saying, I see more and more young people in their late 20s trying to start companies.
Well, it is great. I think there's been a really, one of the things I find interesting, and I'm not quite sure how to read it yet. So we were talking about job mobility, startups to enterprises. So if you're in your 20s and 30s and you have a definable skill, you're a programmer, you're a designer, you're in sales, you're a specialist of some kind, there is a lot of job mobility. People are going between different companies, right? People are moving from startups to enterprise. And these people tend to be quite highly skilled. Now that's in your 20s and 30s. In your 40s and 50s, that we don't see that mobility. And I don't know if that's simply that the companies aren't willing to hire externally for the more senior roles, or if 10 years from now, like I'm saying the 20s and 30s today, so maybe 10 years from now, I'll be saying 20s, 30s, and 40s as it works its way up the workforce. I don't know which way it's going to go.
In one of your episodes, you were talking about Japan's future. You said you're very optimistic about Japan's future. Well, that was a decade ago. You said the next 5 to 10 years are going to be more exciting here than in California, right? So now 5, 10 years have passed. A lot is changing. We have this like higher entry barrier for foreign people, at least, to start companies, to come here. And you've been through the first bubble. You have been, through the Tohoku earthquake. And right now, I feel like we're at this tipping point again. There's talks about the earthquake coming, the bigger one. If you were to, take a guess, what would you say about Japan's economy and society from now, 5 to 10 years from now?
Boy, that's a tough one. Yeah, I think that if we're in a bubble now, which we probably are, things are looking bubbly. But I mean, I was here at 80. This is my third bubble in Japan.
Yep.
So I was here for the real estate, the big one. So yeah, I mean, if you're looking 5 to 10 years, I'm actually surprised we haven't seen more of a correction. In the startup realm, in the next 5, 10 years, I think Japan has proven that it's growing, but it's a much more steady growth. So in the U.S. is probably the other extreme, where you will see 40% growth, 50% drops of investment, massive swings from sector to sector, from year to year. You don't see that in Japan. You see fluctuations, but more steady growth. And it's down a bit this year, so far. and end of last year, things are down a bit, but it's a more steady growth. I think startups are going to continue to play a larger role in innovation in Japan, in replacing the R&D function at large corporations. I think we're going to see more successful university spin-outs. And by successful, I don't mean well-funded and famous. I mean going to market with a product globally. So I think startups are going to be playing a larger and larger role. In terms of like Japan's macro economics, don't know. It is those, it's fun to predict, but just so many variables, so many things that are hard to know. So don't know. And we were talking about, you mentioned before that 10 years ago I was talking about how things are going to improve, and you were saying like, it's harder to come into Japan now as a foreigner. It's not actually. If you back it up all the way 10 years, even with the new changes and reforms, it's still much easier now than it was 10 years ago.
Give me an example. You also mentioned that in the early 90s, mid 90s, it was really hard being a foreigner here.
Well, it was more like just little things. There was no, there weren't nearly as many foreigners. So nothing was translated into English. If you go down to the ward office, everything's in Japanese. All documentation's in Japanese. Even like even the trains. They would have the station names were in kanji, and they were those 1990s dot matrix type kanji. So it's not actually the kanji; it's something that's kind of close. So it really wasn't anything like hostile, It just, things weren't set up for foreigners. They weren't set up to make things easy. Requirements for permanent residency and visas were stricter. Things took longer. So it really wasn't, I think it's more of like more troublesome, more mendokusai than actually difficult. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, I know what you mean. It's there are a lot of steps to be taken to reach something, and right now, for example, to get PR, like the rules are clear because there's a lot of documentation that's been translated into English at least, right? So you have better access to information. So, and also you have more services that help you with all kinds of, if you want to set up a company, if you want to hire gyosei shoshi, shihou shoshi,
starting a company now is so much easier.
It is so easy.
I can't compare it. And in fact, I think one of the most important differences as a B2B guy is that in the 90s, it was damn near impossible for a startup to work with a large enterprise. Even once you got that KK, you couldn't get through their you couldn't get on the vendor list, right? And now, like every major company in Japan has at least one division, sometimes multiple, whose primary goal is working with startups and finding innovation and figuring out how to make this work. I think from a startup point of view, that is the biggest and most important difference. That makes things so much better and so much healthier for the startup ecosystem.
I've been thinking a lot about this now, and I'm not too familiar, but I'm thinking about startups, and yes, a lot of young people are involved. But right now we do have an aging population. If you look at demographics, that would be my guess. We will have less foreigners entering Japan because of the changes that are happening. And so I'm thinking at one point there has to be this, like, instead of top down, decisions have to be taken bottom up. I don't know if that's going to happen
Well,
as seamless as as I imagine.
I think so. I've talked about this on an episode or two in the past too. That Japan, if you look at the reinvention
Mm-hmm.
of Japan during the Meiji Restoration, or the post-war period, Japan can change very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
When it has no other choice.
Yep.
When it's tried everything else, when it's put it off as long as possible, it can change incredibly fast.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, those two transformations, the Meiji Restoration and the post-war Reconstruction, were both top-down, decided centrally, executed regionally, and worked well. And yeah, innovation doesn't work that way. Can't work that way. I think there's no question the Japanese civil service and politicians, most of them, realize this.
Mm-hmm.
They're not trying to control startups as much. A lot of the big R&D grants and that is still being done the traditional way, but their interaction with startups is the right way. It's much more hands-off. Let's see what bubbles up, and it's moving more and more in that direction every time. So
Mm-hmm.
I think there's an acknowledgement that that's the only way it's going to work.
And you think it's going to be like realistic and possible?
Well, it's already happening. It's
Okay.
already happening. But they, if you've got a model that's worked for the last 200 years, it's tough to let it go.
Yeah.
So even things like, when I talk with people at Medi, one thing I always say is Japan needs its own version of DARPA. And DARPA is the American Defense Department's innovation initiative. Well, they will just say, we're looking for technology that can move 90 tons of cargo over 1,000 miles overseas for this kind of budget, go. And then anyone can come with an idea or a pitch, and they have decision criteria of what will make, what will work, what won't, what will qualify. And so much innovation came out of that. Most of what's in an iPhone has come out of the DARPA program.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Japan shouldn't be defense related, but that idea that here's the problem, here's how we're going to measure the solution, everyone's on an equal footing, go for it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the key. And that's, and at TEPCO, actually, we had an innovation program kind of like that. And we got great startups and great people applying from all over the world. It was just fantastic. So that formula is important, but it is institutionally very difficult in Japan to have people let go of control to that degree.
Mm-hmm. Now, you've been here for 3 decades. If you were to give your mid-20s, 29, 30-year-old self an advice on Japan and on Japan's trajectory and, whether to come here and start a business or not, what would that advice look like?
Like I said, my decision-making process wasn't kind of all, it wasn't some 30-year arc I was trying to decide on. It was all like, does this make sense right now? Does this make sense? And sometimes it goes wrong, sometimes it goes right. It's tempting to say, hey, I'd go back and say, don't waste your time on this, or go back and say, buy Bitcoin or something. But no, I think probably my sincere advice to younger self would be, don't worry too much about it. Don't overanalyze. Even the things that don't work out, you'll back out of and get back on track. Because in the end, action always trumps non-action. Because even a mistake, you can learn from a mistake. But after a certain point, you can't learn really by more analysis. Yep. You won't learn anything. That hits the point of diminishing returns pretty quickly, and a lot more quickly than than people like to admit, or I realized initially.
Mm-hmm. That's beautifully said. Now, if I were to put you in a room with yourself, so it's going to be Tim Romero, the entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur, and Tim Romero, the advisor, mentor, investor, author. What would be the topic, the headline of that conversation?
I think it would probably, I'm not sure I could give it a headline. I've never been a good headline writer. I'd imagine this conversation would go pretty much the way it does when I talk with younger entrepreneurs today. So I do a lot of mentoring and just general advice. And by far the advice that lands the most, I think, I mean, I'll talk strategy and tactics, of course, and that's really useful. But just being able to say, like, okay, well, you're going to have to do this, and this is going to be really hard. In fact, I had one founder come back to me and said that of all the advice he got, the one he really appreciated, he was going out to market, and it was just going to be rough. It was a good company. They did well. But I was saying, look, here's the situation. This is going to be really, really hard. Mm-hmm. And it was. But he was saying just knowing that it was supposed to be hard and that's okay. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't like anything he was doing wrong. And like he said, that was just invaluable. Like I was the only one that told him, like, this is going to suck, but keep at it. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, maybe it's that same advice I was saying myself, like, don't worry too much about it. You're not doing anything wrong. Just keep at it. Mm-hmm. If you're heading the right direction, keep at it. And if you're not, there's no harm in like taking a few steps back and correcting the course.
Was there a worst decision up until now that you made in your?
Oh, I'm sure there was. I don't know. I don't really think about it that mm-hmm. way. I just don't. I mean, I'm sure I could think of it and come up with some real doozies. Because I mean, God, I've done stupid stuff over the years, but I just don't think of it that way. Mm-hmm. I don't think about regrets, or I don't think about, I mean, tactically I'll think like, hey, why didn't this work? What could I do better? Mm-hmm. But that's more of like a learning thing. Yes. And you move on. I just don't, I don't think too much about that. Yeah.
I think it's a beautiful mindset to have.
I think you can drive yourself crazy, mm-hmm. Thinking about that.
Get into this analysis paralysis thing and then, just not knowing the way out anymore.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely been times where I felt that way, where, certainly between, companies where I had lots of little projects, nothing getting traction, mm-hmm. Yeah, it feels terrible at the time, but you get through that.
Okay. Well, look, I have so many more questions to ask, especially about, bootstrapping or like funding and fundraising and all of that. But on a more personal note, you've been here for 3 decades, done a lot of things. What's next for you in your chapter?
That's a good question. I'm not sure, honestly. So I stepped down from the partner role at Jira Ventures a few months ago.
Okay.
Right now, I'm just looking for something that's exciting enough to do full time, and I'm not quite sure what that is yet.
Well, what about podcasting?
Oh, I'm going to keep podcasting. I love podcasting.
On a more bigger scale, because I feel like you briefly mentioned that before, but like when you wanted to pitch that to the big companies, you were probably just ahead of your time. Back then, it's because Japan especially wasn't ready for podcasting.
Well, I think actually, I was a little bit ahead of my time, but not too much. Because like the guys at Dentsu were saying they were thinking about podcasting. They had a podcasting team.
Oh.
And they were saying like, oh, okay, well, we want to experiment with it, but we need at least, so send money in would have been like, you know, $100,000 in inventory a month.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh yeah, no problem. I had no idea. Right? I mean, that's like an order of magnitude larger than anything I had. Like, but I could get it. So the timing was good. I'd say now, podcast networks is kind of, people know how to do it right. There's no room for. I don't say there's no room for innovation, but there's nothing exciting and new that I could add there. But it might have something to do with podcasts or media, or I'm not sure. A lot of it really is just finding that problem we're solving, putting one foot in front of the other, and like I'll know it when I see it. And this time around, I'm not so stressed out about like spinning my wheels on different projects, right? Yeah, I've done enough of that.
Okay. Well, yeah. How can people reach out to you?
Check out the show. disruptingjapan.com, and you can contact me there. There's a form and contact info, or on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to get in touch with.
Okay. Yeah, that would be it from my end. Again, so many questions, not enough time. I don't want to keep you busy with all of this. So I appreciate your time.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
So
I really
much.
appreciate it. It's been fun.
Cool. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching and for staying until now. It means the world to me. I need your help. If you want this show to improve, if you want to learn more about self-help, entrepreneurship, self-development, how to build a business and a life in Japan, let me know your feedback. Let me know how I can improve on communication, on the choice of topics, question. Obviously, it's a new format for me as well, but I'm constantly trying to improve with your help, with your feedback. Thank you so much again for staying, for watching. And yeah, drop a comment. You don't need to like the video, but give me your feedback, please, in the comments here on YouTube, on LinkedIn, or on Spotify. And I'll try to improve consistently. And yeah, have a beautiful February. Peace.